Dr. Bimal Jalan, who's helping us kick off this series, former Governor of the Reserve Bank of India, who's been very kind to join us on the show today. Dr. Jalan, very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for coming in here. Let me ask you, sir, firstly, as you see it, sir, what's the big picture behind the budget? You know, we've spoken to you over the past year. There have been times you've been critical of the way the political economy has been managed. Are you satisfied that this time around we're going to get a prudent budget, a macroeconomically focused budget, sir?
Yes, of that there is no doubt. You know, I mean that the maximum attempt is going to be made this time. I mean, and we have a good person in authority who will be presenting the budget on both fiscal consolidation, and everything that has been talked about is good. I mean, of that there is no doubt, and I hope we will be on the right track. But saying what we will do and actually doing it are two different matters, and that I won't go into it at this point of time, but I am looking forward to a good announcement at least.
Dr. Jalan, you know, I'll come to the simple and the single one point that everybody is worried about, that somewhere there will be politics that will creep in, somewhere there will be populism that will creep in. We've seen it happen through the early part of the last fiscal, which is going to end on the 31st of March. Do you, from the conversations you have, from what you read, from what you hear, sense that the political establishment is now very mindful of the fact that we can't mess around with the economy anymore? There's no room left to mess around.
No, there is no doubt. I mean, the political establishment, or I mean, the whole thinking within the government is definitely on the side of fiscal consolidation, on the side of reviving investment, on the side of lowering inflation. All those are well known, so I need not go into that. It's a question of how to get it done, because the problem is complex. I mean, it's not easy. Announcements are easy, but doing it actually in practice on the ground is much more difficult in our political environment, and you also mentioned briefly about that. But it's a difficult issue, so let's not minimize the problem that the government faces, but the determination there now certainly is evident that they are going to do something worthwhile to reduce policy impediments to growth, policy impediments to fiscal correction. But how the policy actually works out on the ground is for us to wait and see.
Dr. Jalan, let me just now start talking about fiscal consolidation. You know, the numbers are there now. The finance minister seems like he wants to follow that roadmap, reduce fiscal deficit by 60 basis points every year. But the problem is that, you know, we have a weak growth backdrop. So technically, you have to be very careful about where you're adjusting your, your expenditure. Because, for instance, in Q3 and Q4 this year, there's already talk that lower government spending is starting to drag on growth. So does it then become about subsidies? And that's the only lever you have to reduce expenditure, sir?
No, I think that's a very important point you have made. I mean, that it's the structure of expenditure and where you reduce subsidy is the important point. Now, there is no problem if you are reducing expenditure and correcting your fiscal deficit on what you call the current account. I mean, as it were, current account, that is current expenditure, administrative expenditure, diversion of resources, 48% of PDS expenditure is diverted, public distribution system below the poverty line. So the concentration has to be in minimizing this kind of revenue expenditure, revenue deficit. But so far as public investment is concerned, so far as building roads is concerned, transport is concerned, power is concerned, we have to take measure to ensure that the kind of targets that we set are actually fulfilled and capital expenditure doesn't decline. That is the most important issue in tackling fiscal deficit, is then that we should not sacrifice capital expenditure or public investment in crucial areas for development of our country.
In fact, sir,
does it make sense what I am saying?
Absolutely, sir. In fact, the suggestion has been made that you need a drive to boost public expenditure right now to then hopefully, bring back some amount of private investment. But my point is, where do you cut back? You've already done something on diesel subsidies, so that's going to adjust, in a staggered fashion. You've done away with petrol subsidies. There's kerosene, LPG, where, the political sensitivity is very high. And there's a new food bill which is coming in, which is going to add to the food subsidy. So I'm just wondering, where are the elements where we can actually consider cutting back? Fertilizer, perhaps, sir?
No, you see, fertilizer, etc. are pricing issues, and I am sure that something has to be done there. But you are right that so far as measures are concerned, we have taken some of the right measures in trying to reduce the scope of revenue expenditure or scope of subsidies. But the more important point to my mind is to try and make sure that the diversion of our public resources to wasteful expenditure, to corruption, to other areas which don't add either to investment or to consumer relief at the below the poverty line is done. I mean, you just look at Planning Commission study, which says 48% of the subsidy that you are providing for below poverty line persons in distributing food is actually diverted. This is not your assessment or my assessment or somebody else's assessment. So, I mean, what do you do? And we have started a cash transfer scheme, and I hope that would work. And measures we have to concentrate on, that India has all the resources, all the abilities, all the technical competence to do what it wants to do. But, you know, at the governmental level, there is a tremendous complexity, fractious politics, and we can talk about it if you have time. And in implementation, there is no accountability. Who is responsible?
So these are all areas, sir, outside the budget, but they link in so closely to the budget that perhaps it would be important to talk about these issues, cutting down wasteful expenditure, leakages, the cash transfer scheme. I'm not sure if we'll get a further roadmap, but do you think that's something that we need to build on, sir?
Absolutely, but we have to build it in a way that it doesn't lead to more of the same. You know, I think that we should start slowly. We should do what we can. We should make sure that implementation is there. But more important than everything else is, if I set a target of expenditure, capital expenditure, somebody has to be accountable, somebody has to be responsible, and it has to be realistic. And I have no doubt that when you see this year's budget, as has been the case, I've been involved in all this for a very long time, that we all used to do this, that you find that we announce something by way of capital expenditure, investment, subsidy, welfare, poverty alleviation, and so on and so forth. It's not fulfilled. Who is accountable? And, again, I think accountability of ministers should decide. I mean, my point is that ministers should not decide. But if they decide that, you'll fly from here to there, Air India would do this, that, and the other, the highway authority would do this and the other, then they should also take responsibility for not fulfilling the targets.